Greetings, guys and gaias. This is the intro to Rhesus negative blood group research, a comprehensive study guide by Jennifer Renee Anthony, 2022. Disclaimer: I am not a medical professional. However, this research is the result of many years of personal studies. All relevant links are in the description. Okay, so let's get started. This is episode 8, explaining RBCs as targets of infection and host susceptibility. RBCs are red blood cells. Platelets are produced from very large bone marrow cells called megakaryocytes. As megakaryocytes develop into giant cells, they undergo a process of fragmentation that results in the release of over 1,000 platelets per megakaryocyte. These platelets are naturally absent of the RHD antigen. I'll say that again. These platelets are naturally absent of the RHD antigen. Also, platelets are only found in mammals. Please remember that when I say RHD antigen, this is synonymous with RHD positive. Platelets prove that Rh positive antigen is not natural or normal to mammals. The cause of the immune response is the Rh antigen, not the antibody. The antibody responds to the foreign antigen. Now, when I say that, most people will say, oh, well, 85% of the population is Rh positive. That's because they have inherited the protein on the surface of their red blood cells. Obviously, you can survive without having that protein or that antigen, which is why the universal donor is not just type O, but O negative. The antibody is a normal reaction to a pathogen antigen, as we will discuss later in this video. In order to understand targets of infection and host susceptibility, you have to know the difference between an Rh antigen and an antibody. Please go to the basics and see episode 4 on explaining inheritance and prevalence, as well as episode 1 on explaining the rhesus factor. All of these videos are laying the foundation for understanding of future videos. As stated in episode 7, Rh positives who have inherited the RHD antigen are more likely to contract HIV/AIDS and other infectious diseases because pathogens communicate with human cells through physical interactions with various human proteins on the surface of the red blood cell, the RBCs, and thus are able to penetrate within the interior of the cell. These interactions allow the pathogen to enter the host cell, manipulate important cellular processes, multiply, and invade other cells. Specific immune responses are triggered by antigens. Antigens are usually found on the surface of pathogens and are unique to that particular pathogen. The immune system responds to antigens by producing cells that directly attack the pathogen or by producing special proteins called antibodies. Remember, normal red blood cells do not have antigens, and neither do platelets. This is why type O Rh negative is the universal donor, because it does not have any antigens. So what are the red cell antigens? Antigens are substances that produce an immune response. Red blood cell antigens include the KEL antigen and the Rh antigen. If you have the Rh antigen, you are considered Rh positive. And as I mentioned this before in the basics of the rhesus factor, it's much like how you would test positive for the COVID antigen or pathogen. If you don't have the Rh antigen, you are considered Rh negative. Now, I can't stress enough to you that creating antibodies to antigens and pathogens are normal. This does not mean that Rh negatives who are RHD antigen absent are not from Earth. Our immune system is doing exactly as it should. Also note that the Rh negative is the universal donor, as I've mentioned several times before, not the Rh positive, regardless of blood type allowed. So when someone says, but the universal donor is blood type O, kindly remind them that they must be Rh negative. The reason why O is a universal donor type is also discussed in episode 7. So how do antigens protect us from infection? This is an interesting question and answer. The immune system recognizes and destroys or tries to destroy substances that contain antigens. Your body's cells have proteins that are antigens. These include a group of antigens called HLA antigens. Your immune system learns to see these antigens as normal and usually does not react against them. So why does it react against the RHD antigen? Because it's not normal to humans, to mammals in general, as I've proven to you through the absence of this RHD antigen in the red blood cells and platelets. So why does it say that antigens can protect us from infection? Simply put, the pathogen or antigen can trick or evade or teach the immune system to accepting it and or build a tolerance to it, much like ROGAM does. Keep in mind that in the case of Rh negative versus Rh positive, they want us to view the Rh positive antigen as normal because 85% of people have inherited on their red blood cells, and the Rh negative, who is antigen absent and has the antibody, as abnormal. Let me say that again. They want to pose the Rh positive as normal and the Rh negative as abnormal. This could not be further from the truth. As you will learn below, an antigen is a pathogen. I've also gone through this in previous episodes. The only difference is that they want to normalize the pathogen in order to dumb people down and make them more controllable, more conformity, more susceptible to diseases, whatever, which is why they even give the ROGAM to Rh negative mothers in the first place, to give her child a better chance of inheriting and surviving with the antigen or pathogen. ROGAM is an Rh positive enabler rather than eradicating the Rh antigen. This is a topic for a future episode, but like I said before, you can survive without the Rh antigen. There wouldn't be an AIDS epidemic. Most people wouldn't be dying from COVID. And the Rh negative is the universal donor. So there's lots of reasons that they should be eradicating the Rh antigen instead of demonizing the Rh negative person. So here we find a term called antigenic variation. How does antigenic variation help a pathogen evade a host's defenses? Antigenic variation and antigenic alteration refers to the mechanism by which an infectious agent, such as a protozoan, bacterium, or virus, alters the proteins or carbohydrates on its surface, and thus avoids a host immune response, making it one of the mechanisms of antigenic escape. What are antigens on pathogens? And I just want to say real quick, that's the previous antigenic variation, and the antigenic escape is exactly how that antigen or pathogen for the Rh positives becomes inherited into the fetus. So what are antigens on pathogens? This says the invading microbe or pathogen is called an antigen. Let's say that again. The invading microbe or pathogen is called an antigen. It is regarded as a threat by the immune system and is capable of stimulating an immune response. Antigens are proteins that are found on the surface of the pathogen. Antigens are unique to that pathogen. And I want to point this out where it says it is regarded as a threat by the immune system. Now that's why people say that the Rh negative is not from this world or not from Earth. It's because we regard that pathogen or antigen as a threat and our body attacks it. But as I mentioned before, that is normal for normal red blood cells and platelets of mammals. That pathogen, that RHD antigen, is not normal to us. So it's actually the other way around. The RHD antigen is the foreign substance, not the Rh negative who's absent of the antigen. So do antigens tag pathogens? Depending on the antigen, IgG can either tag a pathogen so other immune cells and proteins will recognize it, or it can promote the release of toxins to directly destroy the microorganism. How the immune system protects you from infection. Anything that triggers an immune response is called an antigen. An antigen can be a microbe such as a virus, bacteria, toxins, chemicals, or other foreign substances. But please note that again, this is not normal to the human mammal blood system. Antigens are anything that causes an immune response. Antigens can be entire pathogens, like we said before, bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, or smaller proteins that pathogens express. Antigens are like a name tag for each pathogen that announce the pathogen's presence to your immune system. As you may already know, Rh negatives are less susceptible to viruses, as seen with COVID or as mentioned with the HIV/AIDS virus. However, Rh negatives are more likely to suffer health issues from environmental factors or man-made products. Furthermore, research has shown that blood type A positives are more susceptible to COVID than A negatives, and men are more likely to have severe infection than women. Differences in blood group antigen expression can increase or decrease host susceptibility to many infections. Blood groups can play a direct role in infection by serving as receptors or as co-receptors for microorganisms, parasites, and viruses, as I've shown you that the Rhd antigen can do by attaching itself to the surface of the red blood cells and allowing other viruses and pathogens to get through and trick the immune system into allowing it to spread. It's important to note that there are many contributing intrinsic and extrinsic factors to host susceptibility and targets of infection, including genetic variation, health status, life stage, lifestyle, sex, and the impact of co-exposures and comorbidities. Episodes still to come: Rh-negative health concerns and targeted individuals, debunking myths and conspiracies, and the Rhesus resistance, eradicating the Rhd antigen. Thanks for listening.